Welcome everyone. My name is Dan Murphy. I'm the program manager for Georgia Commute Options, and I'll be moderating today's webinar session. Georgia Commute Options offers a suite of services that are available at no cost to help commuters and employers make the switch from driving alone as part of a regional strategy to reduce traffic and improve air quality. We have a lot of great information for you today on best practices for teleworking, but we also want to make sure that the material is engaging and relevant to what you're going through. To do that, we're going to have a few polling questions throughout the presentation. So let's do one right now to show how the poll will work and for us to learn more about you in the audience. The first polling question we have is to see how often you all were teleworking before the COVID-19 social distancing restrictions took place. So it looks like we had a variety of people, some who were doing it a couple times to full time, and then some who weren't even doing it at all. So that's a good mix. Before I introduce today's presenters, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. For the sake of the presenters, we have muted all participants for the duration of this presentation. The webinar is recording and it will be sent out in a follow-up email. I'd also like to call out the Q&A feature here on Zoom. If you have a question you'd like us to answer, please just drop it in there. There's also a chat feature that we'll be moderating as well. For today's presentation, we have two of our teleworking experts on the GCO team, Elham Shirazi and Bernie O'Donnell. Bernie has an extensive background in many aspects of IT and telecommunications from his experience with the U.S. Air Force, the state government, and private sector businesses. His expertise includes tactical and strategic perspectives through his IT and telecom work, serving in positions employing hands-on technical skills and a variety of organizational assessments and implementations. Elham has over 30 years of experience in developing telework and flexible scheduling programs and is recognized as a leader in this field. Elham has developed resource materials, conducted training workshops, worked with hundreds of employers, and evaluated the impacts of telework and flexible scheduling for organizations across the country and for many here in the Metro Atlanta region. Now, Elham, I know you have lots of great insights from organizations you've been working with the past couple months. You've got some great data that you're going to share with us, but I thought it'd be helpful for the folks who are attending to see from each other's experiences so far. So if we can go ahead and load up the next polling question. It is, what are the current challenges you've been facing while working from home? With this option, you're able to click on more than one. So again, we have a good variety. Looks like balancing home and work demands came in top, which yeah, for those who have dogs, kids, balancing that with by yourself or partner, I'm sure is very difficult. The next question we have is, how are you feeling about telework right now? So it looks like we have a pretty good audience. Things are going well. That's always a good start for us. And with that, I'll now hand it over to you, Elham.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for doing the polling. And I think we've got a group today that has really enjoying teleworking, although I have to say that teleworking probably has been a challenge to many people, and I think that the balancing of home and work, as it stood out from the data we compiled from you right now, and there's 60 of you on the call, is about. I think that the top challenge that everybody else in the country has been facing. Nobody expected for teleworking to be about everything going under one roof, at one time. So this is not typical teleworking, and I wanted to share that with you because what we're facing and what we're looking at is extreme teleworking. Now, as a teleworker, I'm sure you've picked up some great habits while maneuvering around, some of the other issues and obstacles that get in the way of working. They're really not obstacles, it's just a function of, this pandemic. But I think it's important to realize that if you want to be successful as a teleworker, you want to create a safe environment at home with the limitations that may have been there initially with technology and planning and remote access, and with whatever level of trust was there in the workplace. Trust is a critical element of teleworking. And in this situation, I think a lot of managers had to basically say, I am going to trust the employees and work with them, to meet their deliverables. So obviously, I think some of the things that you've probably learned is to plan daily activities. And if you haven't gotten to that pattern yet, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's really important to start with a to-do list and check off items and kind of stay on course. Try to manage disruptions to the degree possible, and we're going to talk about some techniques. Please stay calm and be relaxed, and of course breathe, because I think a lot of people are stressed out right now, and it's starting to surface even in work environments. I'm seeing emails back and forth between people that don't seem to have a calm tone, and we really want to try and keep it under control, although there might be a lot of things going on. So obviously some adjustments for you as teleworkers has been, what is the impact on teamwork and how do I continue collaborating? How will my manager know that I'm working? Isolation can be an issue with full-time teleworking, especially for people who live by themselves. You've probably become a lot more organized, and you're having to manage the distractions in your home, which under normal teleworking shouldn't be there, because under normal teleworking, the idea would be that you're at home, hopefully alone, working, and the kids are at school or at childcare, and your partner, spouse is at work, so that you don't have to manage many things at once. Some helpful tips for getting started, and if you don't have these tips in place right now, maybe it's a good time to start thinking about it. We have a ritual when, we had a ritual when we used to commute to work. I mean, basically you would get up, shower, get dressed, have breakfast, feed the kids, sit in the commute, get to work, de-stress, have a cup of coffee, and then start working. Well, when you're working at home, none of this is going to be in place anymore. So it's still highly recommended that you have some kind of a ritual which says, after this, I'm going to start working. Now, I do realize that some of you may have had to switch your days around. If you have younger children at home or you are homeschooling, it might be that you're able to work in the afternoon while your other partner is taking care of the other half of the day. But still, no matter when you're going to start working, have something that says, this is when I'm going to start. Highly recommend that you do get dressed, get out of your pajamas so that you feel comfortable but not ready to go back to bed, but you don't have to get dressed up. So I guess that's one of the virtues of teleworking. We really recommend you take breaks. Working non-stop is not going to have a positive impact. You do want to make sure you have a mid-morning break, you have a mid-afternoon break, that you move around. And in fact, given that you can't, anymore probably just go into the office kitchen and, sit down and talk with coworkers, a lot of organizations are doing virtual breaks, so that people can just get together, bring their cup of coffee and sit down and talk. Or I've even heard of happy hours that some employees are sharing together after work. And these things do help break up the monotony of just being at home all day and all week. I also want to tell you that it's important to get up for lunch or for a meal. I've been teleworking over 30 years myself, and I always take lunch, and I always step away from my desk and try to spend half hour enjoying a good meal, and really, getting away so that my mind can hit the refresh button. Try to go for walks. We're still obviously in this era of social distancing allowed to do some of that. That does help. If stress is getting to you, meditate if possible. I've even noticed that some employers do have a mindfulness, 45 minutes in the middle of the day where employees get together and meditate. Of course, I am from California, so I would go there. But, it seems that does bring some peaceful thoughts into people's lives. Definitely stay away from the news and the radio while you're working. People are very stressed because of the news. And in fact, I would recommend cutting it out while you're working completely and limiting the time that you spend, on media and getting information about the pandemic. Please have an end of the day ritual, because one of the problems with teleworking is that people, especially those of you who live alone, you might just work and then, get burned out. And we don't want that to happen either. So very importantly, please pick a dedicated workspace at your home. Over 50% of the Americans who are right now teleworking are teleworking at their kitchen desks. And if you live alone, that may be fine. However, ideally, if you are in a situation where there's other people in the home, if you can, pick a different space. If there's a surface somewhere else that you can work, that would be ideal. But the idea here is that you have a dedicated workspace. It doesn't have to be an office, but where you know that when you sit there, that's where you're working. It's not when you're on your couch or in front of the TV. And you also pay attention in terms of how you set up that workspace. We did talk about having a routine and organize, your work schedule based on what the organizational needs are. So, if some things are more important to get done in the morning, that's how you would probably have to look at your tasks and organize them that way. Ergonomics are important. I know that many of you have been rushed into this situation without having had much time. But, we've been probably sheltering in place now for 4 weeks, some of us for 6 weeks. Have a desk. Try not to work on glass. Surface space is the best, but glass is dangerous because it can break. If you can, invest in a chair. I've been on a number of webinars with teleworkers who said, I finally broke down, spent the $50 and got a good chair. A good chair is on rollers. It's got an adjustable back. It has armrests. And it, does provide a lot more comfort than a dining room chair. You've got to be cognizant of lighting. You want to make sure it's directed behind the side. Directed towards the side or behind the line of vision, and you want to be reading at eye level. Direct sunlight should also not be used on work surfaces because it creates glare. You should really pay attention to where your cables are and your wires are, especially if you have others in the household. You want to be cognizant that you're setting up a safe environment so no one's going to trip over your setup or accidentally knock things off. Noise is not typically considered part of the ergonomic setting, and I know that we've had to make exceptions for noise in this telework environment where everybody is in the home at the same time. But please be cognizant that to the degree to which you can reduce, the impact of dogs barking, kids, crying or noises, any of that, it would be a lot more professional. This is a very different environment, but again, in a normal setting, the noise should not be there. And, you definitely want to, put your pets in a different room so that the conversations you're having are seamless and professional. With family, friends, neighbors, I'm at home, but I am working. I think the more you try to create a space around what's work, the more people are going to respect it. And, it's not a bad idea to even train your kids to, be quiet if it's possible and they're of a certain age group, and to be maybe working along the side with you and actually getting trained, because they're probably going to telework a lot in their, their time as they grow up. And have some rules about the materials you bring home from the office. If you have been given, hardware, please do keep in mind that, that is your organizational property, and that your company owns it. So you don't want to have other household members participate. At the same time, you want to be cognizant of how many people are drawing on the broadband while you are doing your work, because that may reduce your, the strengths of your ability to be connecting. We highly recommend that as teleworkers, if your managers have not done this with you, that you try to become a little bit more self-directed. And, maybe at the beginning of the week, and I highly recommend really you do this on a weekly basis at a minimum, define your objectives and the deliverables you're trying to hit, identify, the time frames, send an email or have a conversation with your manager about what those goals are, so that you're both on the same page. And in case, there are other priorities, they have a chance to tell you. I would highly recommend that at least once a week you review status of what's being done with your managers. And obviously, I think we're all getting a little bit of Zoom fatigue, but it's not bad to have a video chat, if possible, with your manager, just to, provide status and feedback. Because again, a lot is gained from having that personal virtual touch. And you can also see facial expressions, and and it allows for a much smoother type of a conversation. I highly recommend that you repeat this goal setting on a weekly basis. This is a very simple template that can be used by employees, by managers, to identify tasks for the week, deliverables. At the end of the week, you might just want to jot down what your accomplishments were. Sometimes you don't have to go to this level, but if it's necessary to keep you focused and accountable, it's not a bad way to track what's being done. Now, in terms of communications, there should be clear direction from you, from managers, from everybody when attendance is required by phone, electronically, or through Zoom. I've been noticing that there's some articles that are coming out on Zoom fatigue right now, and people are finding that maybe hour-long meetings are not as powerful as half-hour meetings, and that people do get tired on a Zoom conversation sometimes. So, consider when a phone might be an appropriate, technology versus a video. And, both can be effective. But, too many meetings in a day are very hard to handle. And I've heard a lot of organizations complain about just too many meetings, period. So be cognizant of when a meeting would be required, and, be kind of choosy about it. It's good to do 15-minute team huddles as needed, just to, again, find out what your coworkers are doing. I've seen employees exchange recipes with each other while they're teleworking, exchanging pet pictures. So these are some ways that social media is helping you, keep connected to the people around you. Please make sure that you take the time to train yourselves on the technology and on the collaborative tools. I think we've all grown up dramatically in the past month in terms of how to use some of the collaborative tools that were introduced in the marketplace before, and actually we're getting quite nimble with it. These bullets about managing your work are the same ones you would have in the office, maintaining contact. Make sure that you're being careful about the security of the information, in terms of, what you're working on. And if there are times when deadlines may not be met, make sure that you're communicating with your team. By the way, keep your Outlook calendars updated so meeting times are clearly delineated. And if there are times when you can't be available because of personal reasons, make sure that that is also reflected on your schedules so that people are aware of that. I think in the context of teleworking, we've gone home from the office. In the office environment, people are very shy about calling each other. They sit next to each other and email. And I think, being at home, you shouldn't be scared of using the phone. It's okay to communicate. If you have questions, try to reach people. If you get a phone call, you're not available, try to just text back and say, I'll get back to you. But it's okay to, communicate. I also wanted to point out that you should definitely talk with your manager to see if you can flex your core hours, meaning that maybe you can start earlier, end earlier, or maybe start later, end later, as long as you have a discussion with your manager as to what are acceptable core hours during the day, where they want you to be available. Definitely integrate others in brainstorming. If you're brainstorming with one individual, hit the pause button and think who else could be good in this conversation, and try to add people, either by adding them to the phone call or by going to a collaborative exchange such as Teams. And I really do want to make the case that, yes, let's use videos, let's have FaceTime with each other, but let's not overuse it either. Trust is critical, so please do build trust, so that it's so that you and your managers have ongoing communication. As I mentioned, trust is a huge pillar of teleworking, and we want there to be trust so that this type of an arrangement can be in the workplace. I think I've talked about not getting burned out. Again, make sure you have work and life balance, especially those of you who don't live with others, because that can get really difficult. I've hit on some of these points. Now I'd like to share some results from some surveys that we're getting in. There are a lot of surveys going on in America right now, in every state, every work environment is trying to study what's going on with teleworking. And CNBC did a survey of close to 6,000 voters in 6 states, so it's a diverse group. And what they found out is that around 40% of the workforce is currently teleworking. I want us to really be cognizant of that, because, if you can telework, remember that, there's several other people who can't, because some people's jobs are really essential. They have to be in a workplace to do it, or at this point, they may be, unemployed. So not everybody can telework. Of that 40% who are currently teleworking, about half of them are saying that they would like to continue teleworking full-time, or at the level they were teleworking before. About 55% are looking forward to going back to the office. And about 60% of people who are working at home, I'm sure you feel like you're maybe in the same category, are feeling that they are being as productive or more productive than they were, before at the office. I think the good news is for the people who are teleworking, at a minimum, teleworking is helping keep productivity, at least the same as it was in the office. Now, for the people who are teleworking for the first time, so there's about 20%, who are teleworking for the first time. And so about 10%, were teleworking before. A good 15% were, are teleworking now more than before, and 20% were, are working at home now, but not before. And again, keep in mind, there's 60% which are saying we are not teleworking. So I think those of you who are, we're, in a way, we're blessed because work is a safe place. It is, something we're used to doing. And if you're able to work at home, I think that's really great. Now, as I mentioned, some people are looking forward to going back to the office. However, I think that organizations have to take the time to develop policies and parameters to make some of this teleworking continue into the future. And please do have your employers join us for other webinars next week, especially on May 7th. We will be talking about what will help organizations go through the transition and try to keep some teleworking in place as a result of our experiences right now. Actually, before I go to the next slide, all right, if you could please introduce a poll, and we want you to tell us what are you doing with the time spent not commuting. So let us know, how, for the time that you're saving, whether it's an hour a day, 2 hours a day. Are you working more? Are you, engaging in hobbies and entertainment? Are you sleeping more, relaxing, or spending time with the family? So please take a second to vote. Okay, so let's see. So, wow, a lot of you are working more, 48%. And again, we did say the multiple responses were allowed. Yeah, 50% are spending more time with their family. That's definitely, I think that's the top category is definitely, you're either spending more time with the family or you're working more. Some of you get to sleep in a little bit and some of you get to relax, probably because you don't have the commute. Now, let's go actually to the next slide. Oops, sorry. So based on that CNBC poll, as you can see, you're kind of lining up right there in terms of spending time with family, because that is a number-one response that's coming in across the board. And I've seen this pattern get repeated, in a lot of different localities. For all of you, you said that, the next most popular thing was working more. And then obviously, some of the, the time to sleep more, relax, and be able to take care of hobbies and entertainment. But this is definitely the trend. We're spending more time with family, and we're definitely probably working a little bit more. So just thinking about next steps, please act on problems as they come up. They're not going to go away. Have conversations, be honest with coworkers, with managers. We're not in front of each other anymore. And it might be a while before you see a group of us get into a conference room. So we need to be diplomatic. We need to, be calm, but, there are issues, we need to talk about them. And initially there is an adjustment period. Boy, nothing could have prepared US workers more than a pandemic for teleworking. You're probably all becoming experts, but also your managers are getting better at it, which is the good news, because they're learning how to manage by goals and by objectives. And over time, this arrangement is only going to get better. So let's try to keep some good habits in place and make it stick. So Dan, I'm going to give it back to you.
Thanks, Ilham. As we transition to the second half of the presentation, we'll focus more on the telework technology side. Again, it'll be helpful for Bernie, I think, to see where our audience is in respect to working with technology. So if we can go ahead and pull up the next polling question. How comfortable are you with technology? Is it a piece of cake for you? Are some of you taking notes with a pencil and paper? So it looks like we do have a lot of teleworkers who are obviously pretty used to technology. So with the next polling question we have is, what percentage of your normal non-telework day requires interacting with a computer or having online access? So before the COVID-19, okay. So no surprise here. A lot of people are used to working online or at their computer, which will lead us into the next question, which is, are there any changes? How much are you working online or working at your computer right now through your telework experience? For the last poll we have here, it is, yeah, no surprise. A lot of people are used to working online or at their computer. And so with that, hopefully that's helpful to you, Bernie, to see where our folks are at within the audience. And I'll hand it over.
It really is helpful, Dan, and thank you, Dan. I think we do see, even though many of us have a pretty good experience with working online or working with these tools and working with our computers, that we're in an environment where we've been suddenly thrown into this, and certainly those in the Atlanta area that experienced the big snowpocalypse in 2014 suddenly got thrown into being stuck at home, hopefully not stuck in the traffic that occurred in that snowstorm, or stuck somewhere other than home. But for quite a while, with abandoned cars and things, people were going nowhere. And we're finding ourselves now going nowhere in much the same regard. So we can make an adjustment when we have 2 or 3 weeks to think about how we might do it, and it's one thing. But when you're suddenly thrown right into it, it's quite another matter. And I also kind of wish we had a poll question that when Elham had asked or had made note of the fact that we shouldn't be working in our pajamas, I would have liked to know how many people felt guilty at the point that she said that. I'll bet there were more than a couple. It wasn't me, but I'm sure there were more than a couple. We're moving into our technology changes, and those of you, answering the poll questions in the sense that you're pretty comfortable and have teleworked in the past and have used your computer and the online tools to a great degree in the past. But you notice there were some in the poll who didn't. So there, among us, we're all having quite different experiences, and where some of us might be proficient and comfortable with one technology, we might not be in another. So there's certainly an opportunity for us to have some empathy for each other and to help each other out. We're moving from an environment where the on-premises technology that we're used to, that had been selected by our employers in most cases and was standardized among all the workers, has moved to an environment where we might be on different platforms using different software tools, and it's not quite the same experience. Our in-person interaction in meetings, a lot of FaceTime, a lot of in-person interaction has moved to at least some seemingly in-person interaction in terms of video calls and even voice calls, trying to simulate that, but they're not exactly the same. There are some silver linings there in an office environment. Typically, if someone wasn't available for a meeting, you'd reschedule the meeting, or you'd just tell them, well, you missed out. And someone might happen to take some notes for you. With some of the tools we have now, especially around video conferencing and audio conferencing, someone can record the meeting for you quite easily with the click of a mouse. And you can check it later, check it the next day or a week later, or even if you were on the meeting, have the advantage of being able to review that meeting and see what it was you might have missed or what else you want to make note of. In terms of our connectivity, we've moved from an environment where we didn't need a lot of connectivity, and certainly back some time ago in a home environment, we had very low bandwidth capabilities, and now most of us have high-speed internet or Wi-Fi in combination with that. And cellular data actually does work quite well if you can either purchase an independent hotspot device or use your smartphone in a hotspot mode to have it serve a Wi-Fi type signal to your laptop or computer. It can give you a pretty good experience in terms of a bandwidth for most of what you need to do. As far as the technology to support telework, we're fortunate these days, especially being thrust into the current COVID-19 situation, that we have the cloud-based applications we have. We don't need a person from tech support to come and load software on our machines or do updates as in the olden days. We're able to access these services and use them in a fairly collaborative way. Most of those tools offer collaboration software as part of their the bundles of some of those tools. And in that the technology eliminates travel. In terms of a webinar or a large meeting, when you think of the number of people who would typically go on the road to travel to a large meeting, it's saving a lot in terms of costs and people's time when you multiply that time times all the attendees. In terms of the technology to remotely support customers, there are products readily available that will let you emulate a single room call center environment where your remote agents taking calls into a single number, an 800 help number or an ordering number, for instance, can be geographically dispersed. So they log into the system as available to take calls, and off they go, just as if they were in a cubicle environment. So you need to look at what's most efficient and effective for you. In terms of trying to replicate in-person communication as much as possible, you need to be a little sympathetic toward the needs of some people to time shift, as Elham mentioned, in terms of people with childcare issues or other things going on. They may be working, but maybe working different hours than you. So you need to be a little sensitive to that. But these physical meetings certainly can be replaced by either recorded video conferences, audio conferences, or those that we do in person. And the tools that we typically use in a in-house environment, in-house, I mean at your normal place of work, are replicated pretty well in terms of the software tools, in terms of PowerPoint and whiteboards and the features that these tools have to replicate what you'd use in a work environment. Some of the collaborative technologies available offer multiple features in each of their products, not only word processing or spreadsheets or PowerPoints, but also conferencing and such. Slack, for instance, is a little different, where it uses channels to organize projects and activities. Zoom, which most of us have become familiar with and used extensively. And to some degree, you need to be a little bit aware of all of these products, because different people will be using different products. And even though they'll work much the same, there may be some little distinctions between them. Most of them do offer a pay-as-you-go type model, so they're great in terms of quickly being able to scale up or scale down for what you need. So they're tremendous in terms of a pay-as-you-go structure. So in trying to replicate in-person collaboration, you want to use what's appropriate for the group or the purpose, and you want to do some testing in all these instances for conferencing, screen sharing, etc. You want to put together some groups and try things with your peers, with your customers. Keep in mind they're in the same boat as you, and if a lot of people, if you ask them, let's try this or try that, they'd be happy to, because most of us are all learning something every day, especially as new features come out for many of these products and services. For online whiteboarding, sometimes the quickest way to get to a point is no different than when you're meeting in a room in an office environment or a workplace environment, where you need to get in a room with a board and draw something out. And fortunately, you can do this through screen sharing and some of the online whiteboarding tools. The Zoom is an example, but not the only one. And these tools will allow you to draw, in the case of Zoom and some of them, select shapes and things to try to speed up the process a little bit. And you really can save a lot of time, just as you could in an in-person environment, by letting this represent that virtual whiteboard in a room. Presence is an important factor. In a remote environment, it isn't as easy to notice whether someone's available or working, in terms of if they're time shifting their work or have other responsibilities when they're taking the lunch break. It's not as easy as looking down the hallway and seeing if someone's available. So some of the presence features that show you the status of people, whether they're busy, out of office, what their category of availability is, will help you make sure that you're not disturbing people who are trying to get other work done, and you can give them the same consideration as you would when you were in the office environment. For your home office, certainly use a headset versus using computer speakers and microphone. In a pinch or in a mobile setting, if there's not a lot of noise, for spur of the moment call, you could use the computer audio, but it's prone to feedback, it's prone to picking up noise. The headset reduces the noise. With a noise canceling microphone, your listeners will focus on you and won't hear any noise going on around you. And certainly on video calls, you want to preview what the camera sees and take a look at it. Your lighting is very important. You'll notice as you change it how the image will change. And check your background. You don't want anything in the background that you don't want the world to see, because in a video call, the world will see it. And we need to develop a focus on fraud. If any of you have access to some updated security training, that's a great thing to do. Bad actors will always capitalize on vulnerabilities. There's a lot of fraud out there, people trying to take advantage of the current situation. People will look for weaknesses in a system, or they'll look for weaknesses in a person and try to take advantage. In terms of ransomware, if you keep your files backed up, if you keep your software patched and up to date, you're in good shape. And again, if you can engage in some online security training, that's a great thing to help in times like this. Zoom bombing is something you may have heard of, and Zoom is not necessarily the only product that could fall victim to this, but there's been a lot of publicity about that. And some of that has been addressed by Zoom, increasing education of the controls available and making some updates to their products. Their different tiers of products offer different levels of features, and you may want to look at what you're using for free now versus something that you might pay a little bit for, and see if in fact you may want to pay and get some enhanced features, such as if you're running a webinar, and learn the controls, really learn the capabilities of the system. It's easy to get up and running quickly, but it's worth taking the extra time to learn the controls of Zoom or any of your products. In terms of avoiding technical glitches, certainly testing. Set up some test meetings, test each feature, hand control of screens and such back and forth among the people you're testing with, and become very familiar with those tools. If you start the calls early, people are ready to start right on time, and you can get right down to business. So you don't have people joining for the first 10 minutes of the call, interrupting the meeting each time a new person joins. In terms of your home internet, problems often can result from the individual components or connections, and you can check those. You can bypass your Wi-Fi, go right to your cable modem, and eliminate the Wi-Fi as a factor. Sometimes it's the applications themselves that are slow or delayed, and it isn't the network or your hardware that's the problem. So consider that as well. And cellular can be a backup if your home internet, through your cable company or telephone company isn't working. You can use that cellular hotspot, and you can do certain things just on the phone itself that can get you by in a pinch. Most of the companies that provide internet services have pretty good online resources and even phone call resources that will walk you through a troubleshooting tree, where they'll tell you, unplug this, try this, what was the result, yes or no, and take you to the next step. So those can be good resources too. I also think it's good if you can get a peer group of coworkers to support each other in terms of any technical problems that you might have, and you can share ideas and thoughts on getting out of troubles. So in terms of recommendations, do try video. As Elham said, you can get burned out on it, but you can also lose out if you don't take advantage of it. There's a correct balance. There's the right type of meeting for video. There's the right type of meeting for audio. There's certainly the time and a place for email, but don't avoid video. There is a tendency, I think, for people to not try something that they're not comfortable with. But if you try it, you'll find that there are certain situations that it's just the ticket. And try to optimize your environment as much as possible. Again, test meetings and testing each feature will help you decide what features are useful to you, and you can share that advice and information with your coworkers and customers and clients. And with that, Dan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Bernie. Before we kick off the Q&A portion, I just want to give a short plug about GCO and the Georgia Commute Options website. If you're new to GCO, I'd urge you to check out our programs and commuter incentives that do include teleworking, that can be found on the website or on our GA Commute app. And lastly, we have this QR code here on the slide. If you could please take a photo of that on your phone. We have a survey. It'll take less than a minute to give us your feedback. We really want to know how we can improve our webinars. And with that, I will now open it up to question and answer. Let's see here. Got a couple coming in here. The first one is, will my company reimburse incurred expenses related to working from home for things such as home internet or home computer use? Elham, do you want to start off with that?
Sure. I can just weigh in on that. I think a good 90% of companies do not, I would say, reimburse employees for the use of their internet or their phone calls. That may change in the future as, you know, people are teleworking more. Again, it's something that you may want to discuss with your organization, and maybe as organizations decide to cut back on overhead space, then, you know, maybe there'll be some funding that can be set aside to help employees equip themselves better and pay for some of these costs. Bernie, did you want to chime in?
Thank you, Elham. I think you're right. In my experience, that's what I've seen as well. I've seen a few who've offered a stipend, you know, a fixed amount toward wireless service or cellular service. But usually that depends on a person's job function as to whether that will apply. And I think when you generally look at what are the costs of commuting in terms of fuel, in terms of wear and tear on your vehicle, in terms of the costs of public transportation, and even more just in terms of your time for commuting. If you position that against the costs spread out over time, you generally find you're probably saving much more than it's costing you, even if you were to refresh all your equipment every 2 or 3 years. Again, everybody's situation is different, but that's my experience, Elham.
Thanks, Bernie. Next question, I'm gonna hand over to you as well, Bernie. It's what is the best online platform for independent contractors?
Well, I think best certainly is going to depend on the individual situation. I know I had the feeling that I thought the G Suite, Google's platform would work well for me, and I've used that somewhat, and it does work well. But then as time went on, I found out that most of the people I was interacting with were using the Microsoft platform, the 365 products, and occasionally I'd run into situations where documents were slightly differently formatted and such. And with some of the other features I got, I found it was well worth it in terms of the monthly cost to go that way. So sometimes you get what you pay for, and cost may be a consideration, and it's nice that some of the free options are out there to try things, but I think everyone's situation is different, and anytime you can get a free trial, take it and test it, but certainly look at the features and see whether you may get a lot more by just paying a little more. Back to you, Dan.
Thanks, Bernie. The next question we have is, it's about feeling isolated. I know that for most of us, we're no longer having those conversations that are taking place around the water cooler or the break room or whatnot. Is that something you can talk about, Elham?
Sure. And I think, you know, the question that's being raised is that the teleworkers trying to get some of those discussions going or conversations going, and they haven't been happening. You know, not everybody's an extrovert, so that you put them behind before, you know, a webcam and they start talking and sharing. Sometimes it's good to have, you know, just to have, you know, let's say it's a pet time. So I know this may sound a little crazy, but people are doing these things, you know, is to introduce your pet to your coworkers, have a video conference where everybody kind of has their pet along and they can show their pet, or it might be about meet my children or meet my family. So I think make them topical, and it would be great if it's about something that's, you know, does not have anything to do with work, or maybe, you know, post a question and say, what is the first thing you want to do, you know, once the pandemic is over? I think you got to create those conversations. So that would be my advice.
That's a really good idea. I'll have to do that with our team. The next question we have, I think is going to be set up more for you, Bernie. Someone who is using their telephone a lot more now, and they don't really want to have to give away their personal cell phone number. So they're asking about ways that they can invest in a headset or, you know, different software for a lot of the conversations now that they're having over their cell phone.
I guess that's a good approach. And also there's a number of apps out there for which you can get a phone number that will ring in through the app to your cell phone. And if you make a call from your cell phone, it will show the number that you have assigned to that app. It won't show your cell phone number. And a lot of these are fairly inexpensive, $10 or less a month or so. Again, depending on whether you get reimbursed for it or whether the cost is worth it. But it's worth checking a few of those out and seeing if one might fit your needs. And the advantage of that certainly is it's more mobile than just what you can do on the computer. It's there on your phone wherever you go.
It looks like that's all we have for questions. Yeah, someone put in the chat that Google Voice is free, which is a really good point. Going back to what Bernie had talked about before with the G Suite, for those that it works for, it is nice that you can integrate that Google Voice number with your cell phone and take calls and voicemails to a Google Voice. I'm not seeing any more questions. So I want to again thank Bernie and Elham for presenting today. Thanks to all of you who have attended. And hopefully we'll see you on upcoming webinar series. And again, please sign up for our app if you haven't done so, or create a login account online. Have a good day.